terms of damage. Now, also earlier in the night or in the morning, if you're watching this in the West Coast time frame, you had the likes of Katie Taylor try to move up a couple of weight classes against Chantel Cameron, in which she miserably failed. And rightfully so, because you know what? The way that they judged in Ireland, obviously, you're going to be a little bit skeptical because Chantel Cameron is an away fighter, and obviously Katie Taylor is the bigger star in that aspect. So you would be a little bit hesitant to think that the Irish judges were going to give Chantel a fair share. Where lo and behold, they did exactly just that. They gave her a fair share, and not only did they give her a fair share, they also gave the entire fight to her in terms of a decision. So going tonight with Devin Haney versus Lomachenko, look, I don't think there's any surprises here that obviously Lomachenko was able to commit to a certain amount of damage. He was able to land a few shots. He was able to look like the old Lomachenko that we knew him to be. It was almost like he unlocked in his character of Avatar in whatever way that you want to look at Lomachenko. It's almost as if the guy was unlocking the Roy Jones Y'all Must Have Forgot track as some sort of like reward system that you would see in a video game. Now, why do I say that? Because he made you guys remember exactly why he was called the Matrix and why he is such a complicated style to deal with. Now, the fact that he wasn't able to win tonight doesn't really say much, but at the same time, you can't argue with the fact that Devin Haney did win the fight based on round by round. Now, in full disclosure, did I score the fight round by round? There are times where there are fights that I score round by round to really get an understanding of, okay, who's really winning this based on my own subjective opinion. Because by the end of the day, that's really all it is just nothing more than a subjective opinion, right? Because you have your a view of how you see the fight. And then imagine this, put this in perspective. You're at home watching this within a full camera view of the different shots that are going on in the fight, right? All the different situations that are going on and all the different camera angles that you have in the safety of your home. Whereas if, let's say you're a judge, you're watching ringside, maybe you're not getting all the full view or angles of what's going on in the fight. So what happens is that you end up being in a situation where sometimes you're seeing a different fight than what everybody else in the world sees. So that's also a reality. And again, it's always common for a lot of people to always say robbery this and robbery that. The truth is that you can only have 3 judges and you can only have 2 fighters, 1 referee, and by the end of it all, there's going to be a lot of subjective opinions within those matters that are not always going to be in the favor of the eyes of the beholder, i.e. the audience that's watching the fights. So with that in mind, let's see. Let's okay, just wanted to make sure that the mic was on. What the mic was on right there. So okay. So once again, earlier of the night, you had Cameron defeating none other than Katie Taylor, which, by the way, is Katie Taylor's first professional loss. And Conor McGregor was in the crowd, not so much of the entire fight, the way that Eddie Hearn watches the entire card from top to bottom. But obviously, Conor was there to support his fellow country woman other than Katie Taylor. So while Conor was there, I think that he reminded himself that, you know what, in this game, nobody cares that you're a superstar, because no doubt about it, Katie Taylor is a big superstar in women's professional boxing, especially out in Ireland. I think she's right up there with Conor McGregor. Now, obviously, Conor McGregor is Conor McGregor, and there's nobody that's ever going to be like him in the history of professional MMA. However, you can have people that are just a little bit right underneath that in terms of notoriety. Well, none other than Katie Taylor is somebody that can fill that role. And in a way, she kind of understands what Conor is going through as this famous person having all this weight on her shoulders. Well, now I think what I was trying to get at with that rant was that Connor tonight learned that anybody at any particular time can lose to anyone out there. And it doesn't matter if you're the biggest superstar in the world or if you are um, a, one of these people that's very well known or this and that. The bottom line is when you step in that cage or when you step in that ring, you can't bring your name in there with you. You can't bring your accolades, what you've done in the past. So, in other words, when Conor McGregor walks in there in the cage against Michael Chandler, he can't bring the Conor McGregor that was the double champion who defeated Eddie Alvarez. And also the Conor McGregor that has walked in there and fought meticulously in a methodical fashion against Nate Diaz in the second fight that they had. He can't bring that Conor McGregor in there. The only Conor McGregor that he can bring in there is the guy that has rehabilitated his injured leg and now is going into one of the toughest fights that he can come back to in the UFC's 155 division, which is none other than Michael Chandler. And tonight, Conor McGregor got to be reminded of that in the same similar fashion that Devin Haney was reminded that, you know what? Even though I was the younger guy, even though I was the undisputed champion on paper, I could not take that in there with me because by the time that I walk in that cage, I still have to go in there, or I'm sorry, the ring in this particular aspect. I still have to go in there and deal with this man's footwork. I have to go in there and deal with this man's elusive fighting style. I have to work with his angles. I have to work against his jab. You look at the picture here. Look All right. So we are now live. Sorry about that. Had to transition from that video and into the live stream. So I was playing a bit of a video from 7 months ago, basically describing why Russian Muslims, if not now, most Muslims now run the fight game, right? And I know that a lot of people are going to have a lot of, I guess, rebuttals to that for one reason or another, because oh well, you're just trying to big up your own people or this and that. Yeah, I understand that. I understand there's an aspect of that, because let's just be honest, right? Combat sports is sort of a tribal sport. I mean, Dana White said it best, right? We all love badasses that look like us. Okay, so when I see a Muslim guy that's dominating the MMA space and now the boxing space, you can't help but cheer for that guy. Also, for the same reason why the likes of uh, let's say Conor McGregor, the way that he brought the Irish out, right? Like you look at the Irish and this overwhelming support that they have for this guy. It's it's not anything unusual, right? Why would people not support a guy like that when you are Irish yourself? He represents your country. And by the way, when Connor came out, that was one of the hardest times in Ireland's economic history, and we're talking about probably one of its worst times going back from the potato famine and whatnot. But that's the reality of things, right? Nowadays, you got to understand, when you have this Palestinian conflict going on, there's a lot of genocide that is happening in this particular war. And then on top of that, you have a lot of families that are being displaced, and you have Muslims from around the world now getting persecuted for perhaps maybe supporting a certain cause that, well, it may seem dodgy to some people and may have a 50-50 outlook on certain law enforcements, but nonetheless, harassment comes to play. Uh, Unwarranted surveillance comes into mind. Discrimination in workplaces come to mind. So you can't help but think, well, you know what? There's a reason why people out there want to cheer for a Muslim champion, right? And this is the reason why Khabib became as popular as he did when he fought Conor McGregor. During that time, Conor McGregor was sort of in this uh, high that he had coming off of the Floyd Mayweather fight. Now he came into MMA defending his linear world championship, being the 155 champion and the double champion before leaving the UFC. Well, not leaving, but sort of in a hiatus to go box Floyd Mayweather, and then comes back and fights the newly crowned 155 champion in Khabib. And of course, the storyline goes with Khabib and Connor going at it, and Connor throwing a dolly in a bus, on top of the fact that he wanted to add religious aspects into the entire promotion, which you can argue one or the other had profounding positive effects on the pay per view sales. But either way, what we have tonight is a continuation of that, both in boxing and MMA. Magomed Ankalaev had that lackluster draw against Jan Blachowicz. He had a chance to win the title, undisputed title. Nothing came out of it because it was a draw. Then in came Jamal Hill the next month to take on Glover Teixeira in Brazil, only for Jamal Hill to win it and later on vacate it. And now here we are in this same particular position where we do have a clear 205 champion now. But at the same time, you got to ask yourself, does Alex Pereira really feel like a real world champion, considering that he had lost to Israel Adesanya? I mean, I let you guys sort of figure that one out, right? So let's take a look at some of the fights that they had going on tonight. Now, if Ankalaev at 19-1-1 would somehow, let's say, become world champion. I mean, that's that's quite impressive, right? I mean, his only loss was to Paul Craig. We see where Paul Craig is at now. Jim Miller gets a submission win in the third round. After that, calls out Paul Felder, even hints at calling out Brock Lesnar with the joke of the week, him saying that he could beat Brock Lesnar. Ricky Simone gets defeated by Mario Batista, who just basically outpaces him in his whole entire fight. Even without any takedowns, Ricky Simone just attempted 13 takedowns, which at some point I think really affected his gas tank. Phil Hawes gets knocked out by Bruno Ferreira in the first round. Andre Arlovsky loses to Waldo Cortez Acosta after a 5-round lackluster decision. Now, here's the thing with the heavyweight division, right? You usually see knockouts in these particular types of divisions, right? It's very easy to see a knockout, but with someone like Acosta and then Arlovsky, who's very well experienced, sometimes you could sort of pull back a little bit. So this is the result that you got where you didn't really see any knockouts go on. You didn't see any takedown attempts by any of them. They just struck the whole entire fight, and Waldo just came out on top. And Arlovsky, well, Arlovsky just looked like how Arlovsky had always looked. I mean, sort of in there, but not in there at the same time. And what do I mean by that? Well, he wasn't really committed to a lot of the shots. And again, this has a lot to do with the fact that he is a little bit older. He did manage to put a certain amount of volume, but it's just, I don't know, man. You know, it just wasn't there, right? Waldo is not exactly a world beater, is he? But for them to have this type of fight, I think it doesn't say that Andre Arlovsky should retire, but it also doesn't say that he should fight at any higher levels. That's the best way to really put it. And in the prelim cards, you have Peterson and Parson. Parson with a decision. Marcus McGee, how about this guy getting a knockout, right? Just styling on him at the end of it, right? Hits him with a spinning kick and then just swarms on him with a barrage of punches. And then the referee steps in and finishes the fight. Fareed Basharat basically used his wrestling this whole entire fight, 5 takedowns to neutralize Taylor Lapalus and unarguably even outstruck him as well, which, by the way, was followed up by the takedown. And that's the reason why he was able to score all those points and was able to take him down at the way that he did. Nicholas Mota gets a first round TKO against Tom Nolan. Josh Van, how about this guy? Great performance on his part. 222 total strikes within 2 rounds, 69%, 1 takedown out of the 1 takedown attempts that he had. Stuffed about 4 takedowns from Felipe Bunez, which shows a lot of great takedown skills, takedown defense skills on his part, and really is showing the type of striking where he downloads your data in the beginning of the fight, and then out of nowhere, he just comes and figures you out and then starts moving in on his own in terms of the striking and the boxing that he will present against you. And great performance on Josh Van for his second time out of coming into the UFC. And then we had the Maloney fight, which I believe he had fought a Mexican gentleman, 12 rounds of what I believe was one of the lower weight classes, I believe 120 of some sort. So he goes in there and, well, it was a great majority decision win on his part. He really made him earn that one. Now, of course, a lot of people are going to say it was a screw job or this and that. You heard that in the beginning of the audio when I played that video from several months ago. That's sort of what we had going on here. A lot of people are going to say that that was just an absolute disgrace because he was, well, he made a great account of himself. But yeah, Maloney won that in the end. And then how about that fight with that Australian fella taking on Christian Mbelli, the French former amateur Olympian boxer, I believe. 25-0 now. He's at the 168 division, wants to fight Canelo. Hey, he made a great account of himself, But you know how these go. Canelo is going to take on the big names, but he's not going to take on maybe the hardest names. And it gets to exactly the topic that we're going to talk about tonight with Arthur Beterbiev, which is, where does his career trajectory go on from here? Right? Because this is the important part of this whole entire conversation. He's 38 years old, and you got to think he's got a great lifestyle because of the fact that he can manage to be this healthy, stay on top at this age, and still knock people out. Probably would still knock people out by the time he's 45 years old. And that's not too far away from now. We're talking about 38. Now he's going to be 40 in 2 years. And then after that, it's 5 years. So then that makes it 7 years from now. He's going to be 45. He's still going to knock people out. He still has a great 7 year run ahead of him. So this isn't something to really sleep on when it comes to Arthur Beterbiev. Of course, at some point when he does get stopped, which I don't see happening, but if he does, they're going to really just blame it on age. Now, speaking of which, I really want to talk about that, considering that Callum Smith is being written off just based on his performance. This is the first time in his whole entire career, out of 30 fights in Callum Smith's career, he's been knocked down. And the first time that he's ever been finished. But that goes to show you, Canelo couldn't even do that to Callum Smith, which tells you that there is no way Callum Smith is going to go in there and fight Arthur Beterbiev. So that's the reality that we have going on with Arthur Beterbiev right now, and the unfortunate reality that he has going on with his career. He's not going to get the big names, but guess what? I think as a hardcore fan, you're really going to appreciate his career when he finishes it. And by the way, this is not, I mean, look, I'm talking like as if he has 2 or 3 fights left, right? I just basically said a few minutes ago that he could potentially fight up till 45. But again, this is at the age right now where a lot of guys are really contemplating retirement. Deontay Wilder is at this age. LeBron James is at this age. I'm at this age, even though I'm still in great shape and I can do great things in the gym and give a good account of myself in sparring sessions with some of the top names in the world in whatever sporting discipline. But the reality is that the time ticks in ways that it doesn't tick if you're 28 or 25, which begs the question: when is he going to fight somebody like Canelo? When is he going to get a chance to fight the big names? But the problem is, there's politics in boxing that will prevent all that, which brings me to this. If none of those things come to fruition, him boxing Canelo, and on top of that, perhaps maybe even boxing some of the bigger names, you can rest assured that he's going to be a hardcore fan's delight in ways that we know what we know, and we know why he's being avoided by the likes of Canelo. So that's really important to understand. Okay. Why would he be avoided by Canelo, and why should we appreciate him as a hardcore fan base? Because he's going to take on the names that we want. For example, he's going to take on Bivol after 3 months post Ramadan. He's going to fight him, according to Bob Arum. So there's some traction going on there. And then the Saudis want to get up on it. And of course, after Ramadan, that they're going to want to open up shop once again, which, by the way, this is the reason why they have what you call the Riyadh season. So they started off in October, and they may end it all the way up till March, because during that time, that's when they're going to have Ramadan. Everything closes down. They give people breaks during work during that day because they know that everybody is fasting. So therefore, it's not really much going on. But after Ramadan, that's where everything really starts opening. So they're going to go in there and bring in a Bivol fight. Now, what is great about this fight? Bivol is the one that beat Canelo. So who cares about Canelo at this point, right? Now, that's the hardcore fan side of me talking. The casual fan side is always going to ask, why didn't you fight Canelo? Well, I beat Bivol. I'm talking in a future setting, in a future tense. If, let's say, Beterbiev actually pulls that off and does it. Okay, so here's a problem with that. You're not Bivol. Bivol may have done it at one point of his life, but you haven't. You see, that's where the controversy is at in this particular setting. So, this is why we have to appreciate the fact that he fought everybody that he should and that he could. And maybe somewhere down the lines, he's going to have a few lackluster fights like this. When I mean lackluster, I mean the matchup, not the performance. Now, with this fight tonight, on paper, it's lackluster. His performance is nothing short of that. Okay. It's not lackluster at all. It's, yeah, absolutely not lackluster at all. But the matchup going into it is. Now, if you're not fighting Bivol next, let's say you fight some random person, I don't know, Lyndon Arthur or something like that. Yeah, that's a lackluster fight. How about if you fight somebody like Joshua Buatsi? Yeah, that's a lackluster fight. How about if you fought any of these light heavyweights out there that are yeah, sorry about that. Had a little technical issue there. So what I was saying was that um you can only appreciate the names that are going to be presented in front of you in terms of who Arthur Beterbiev is going to fight, right? You're not going to be able to see him fight Canelo. I don't see that happening unless, of course, Canelo just decides to do that. Unless he also decides to go down to 168. I don't know how plausible that's going to be or how much reality is going to go into that particular matchup. The bottom line is you have to appreciate the matchups that are given to Bivol. That's just really the best plain way to put it. Because right now he's 38 years old, right? Here's the thing about Beterbiev. You know, the reason why he's able to look like this is because he's had about over 300 matchups in his amateur career. Now, this right here is very beneficial to a pro career. Now, obviously, it's going to hinder you from a pro career when you're starting young. Like, look at Devin Haney. The guy came from Mexico, right? Fought there when he was like 16 or 17 years old because his dad knew that in order for him to get pro fights at that age, he had to go down there because America, well, you have to be 18 in order to do that. In England, you can fight pro Muay Thai, pro MMA, and pro everything at 16. Even Rory McDonald, he fought at 16 years old, starting at a pro. But you saw what happened to him later down in his career. Obviously, it shortened his career, and then he had those wars with Robbie Lawler. But nonetheless, that's the reality of the sport. Whereas with Beterbiev, he's been in this dance over and over and over again. He knows and understands it from a very highly professional level. Look, here's the thing about boxing that I think is really important to point out with people. I know that a lot of the MMA guys sort of criticize boxing as this sport that sort of holds the hands of the top prospects and stars. But again, I really think there's some beneficial to having those repetitious rounds over and over again, just being able to go in there and have these 300 some odd amateur boxing matches. Because now the way that he walks into that ring, it is as if it's really nothing to him. And I think that you can only have that sort of feeling and confidence the way that Arthur Beterbiev had by just simply doing it over and over and over again. I mean, the guy was running on a treadmill prior to walking into the ring, right? So you got to think this is not something most guys would do before they go into a fight. They either sit there, watch TV, or just chill, or just think and ponder about what's going to happen in the fight, or just sit there, be scared and be anxious, or just sit there and be too over excited and too over anxious, and then just go out there and do your job. That's it. That's the way that most guys approach it. But with very experienced guys like Arthur Beterbiev, who's had 300 fights in the amateurs, the way that they approach it is just like another swim session. It's just like another training session. It's just like another treadmill session. And he performed in that sort of way with those short punches that he does. Now, notice when he hurts you, he doesn't go out and swing big hooks the way that, let's say, Christian Mbelli did in the early uh, co-main event of the night of this boxing match. You notice that he was just throwing bombs constantly. Mike Tyson does the same thing. But with Arthur Beterbiev, it's like as if he knows that his hands are so heavy that it's somehow okay for him to just throw straight shots, and he knows that they are going to hurt because of how heavy-handed he is. And you look at the training methods that he does, boy, I got to tell you, I think that there's going to be a lot of revolutionized specific training for boxing that a lot of people can learn from with Arthur Beterbiev. So far, the way that most guys train in boxing is very conventional. They wake up, they run, they jump rope, they hit the bag, they spar, and then that's it. I don't think that there's a lot of boxers out there, especially on the regional levels or maybe even in the international domestic levels, really emphasize a lot on conditioning. Now, the ones that do emphasize a lot on conditioning, you notice just the different level that these guys are at. Canelo, he does a lot of squats, box jumps. Anthony Joshua is starting to do a lot of that. Deontay Wilder at some point started implementing that, but I don't know where that took him or how far he went with these different types of conditioning drills, or he just went back to doing what he normally does or what he's comfortable with. But last thing I want to tell you guys before I sign off with this particular content, okay? I got to tell you the title. Let me address the title, okay? Muslim boys run the fight game in MMA and boxing. You got to ask yourself, why is that? Well, for one, I think there's a discipline factor. When most guys, they get done with fighting tonight, what are they going to do? They're going to go home. They're going to drink a whole lot of beer, mess up their body a little bit, maybe go and take a few drugs, and then that's it. And then they have to go and recover all of that when they get back into training camp or their next fight, if they even decide to start training at all after their next fight. Most guys, they don't do that. Now, with Muslims, imagine this: you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't go out and party. What do? So, what is your enjoyment? Okay, you just train. Okay, what, you just hang out with your family because that's just what Muslim people do. They just live a normal, comfortable life where they just spend time with their family most of the time. And then When they're not, they're out training and doing their job. That's it. That's the formula to all this. That's the formula to why right now, let's take a look at the current win streaks that are going on right now in the UFC, right? I think John Jones is at 19, Leon Edwards is at 13, Islam Makhachev is at 13, and Ankalaev is now at number 12. So Leon Edwards and John Jones are the non-common denominator of that. What's the common denominator of the three that I had just mentioned? Islam, Bilal Muhammad, Ankalaev, all Muslim guys, right? That all have this high win streak that is going on in the UFC. I got to tell you, there's reasons for that. And the answer is really quite simple. I'm going to leave it out with this. I'm going to sign off. I want you guys to go out and like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think right on the comments below. Muslims just have a much more disciplined lifestyle. And quite frankly, it has nothing to do with genetics. It has nothing to do sometimes even with environmental factors of where you train at. It's just for the simple fact that you do the right things, you do the small things, and sometimes the small things is what wins the big fights. So always remember that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed your weekend of fights with Arthur Beterbiev finally being the first guy to knock down and knock out Callum Smith. Magomed Ankalaev finally getting a title eliminator fight against Johnny Walker the second time around from their lackluster disqualification, no contest fight that they had in Abu Dhabi back in UFC 294 to finally finishing it off tonight from the continuation of Abu Dhabi UFC 294. I hope you guys enjoyed the fights, and we will sign off from here and cover the rest of the fights that are going to be happening next week with Sean Strickland taking on Dricus du Plessis and the drama that they've had going on with that. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I hope you guys enjoyed the fights, whichever fights you watch tonight. I watch both of them, whether you watch one or both. Have a great weekend. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Inshallah.